Welcome to the latest edition of the Giants Hangout, presented by Crestron, a proud partner of the New York Giants. Lance Meadow, Russ Salzberg, Howard Cross with you. Our weekly roundtable discussion as we recap the previous game, also look ahead and focus on three themes. And today, we're going to hone in on negative plays on offense, lack of explosive plays, and no takeaways on defense, as the Giants' three-game winning streak came to a halt in New Orleans as they fell to the Saints 24-6. And Howard, I want to start with a theme we talked about in previous games, really outside of the three-game winning streak, and that is the negative plays. And when you have an overwhelming amount of them, it's very hard for this offense to put that on the back burner and be able to move forward. And while the sacks jump off the page, 7 times Tommy DeVito was sacked, it's the third downs that to me were the real killer. They were 2 of 16. And 10 of those 16 third downs were for 9 yards or more. So when you take penalties, when you take sacks, the downs and distances become overwhelming. And when you don't have explosive plays, very hard for this offense to stay on the field and make up for that.
So you use all the catchwords. You keep saying explosive plays, and this is an example of why I've been explaining this to you the whole time. See, what happens is when the offensive line is struggling, as they've been the entire year, they've had some games they played the last 3 games of winning streak. No one really blitzed them. No one ran twists. They were like, okay, it's a rookie quarterback. We'll just play zone, and you guys can get to them because they're playing so bad. Well, New Orleans is in a situation where they need to win to stay in the race in the NFC South. So they blitzed. They did the run blitz. They did pass blitz. They ran twists the entire game. And that's what the game looks like when somebody's coming at you at full speed, doing everything they can to get to the quarterback. You're not going to have what you call explosive plays. You're not going to get the run game started. Every time Saquon touched the ball, there's 11 guys focused on him, eyes up, watching him. Tommy had a couple of nice runs because they were saying, like, we'll sacrifice Tommy's runs for Saquon. Anything that Saquon does, we're going to make sure he's not going to be the guy to beat us. So we're going to stay on top of him. After that, you have linebackers running through the line of scrimmage at the quarterback and giving him big hits. Tommy, got hit hard on the slide. I thought it was kind of a cheap shot, but also Tommy slides very late. So he has to be careful with that. So from an offensive standpoint, the rest of the games they're going to play are guys and teams that are trying to get into the playoffs and trying to hold their position. The Eagles, for God's sakes, they're trying to hold on to their number 1 position, not just in NFC East, but in the NFC period. So they're going to be doing everything they can to try to stay in position or capture the number 1 position so they can have home field advantage. We're not going to see anything other than everyone's best going forward. So the offensive line is going to have to come up with some big overhead play in order to protect the quarterback, in order to get the run game started. And if you can't have great offensive line play, or at least maybe average offensive line play, they're not going to have a shot.
Lance and Howard and I were talking about it just before we went on the air here. I thought Brian Dable said it best post game at the podium. Collectively, we just weren't good enough. It was just, to me, it was, I don't know if it was a collapse, whatever you want to call it. I mean, maybe it was bound to happen sooner or later, but it was not good yesterday in every way, shape, or form. You can talk about the sacks. You can talk about the offensive line. You can talk about, there were a few drop passes, 1 or 2 to Slayton, which, it's not that they were horrible, but they were inopportune. I don't know if there's ever a good time to drop a pass, but those were like on a third down and long yardage could have done something. And then there was one play, I think it was 3rd and 17, and they got 16 on them. It just was, it was an overall bad performance, really, by everybody. Tommy, as Howard told us, the past couple of weeks, it's a great story, and we all fell in love with the story. And it is a great story. A local kid makes good, and I'm not saying it's over, but it was, he was a 3rd string practice squad player. Everybody jumped on this great story. Maybe the story continues, but it is what it is. They just weren't good enough in every way, shape, or form. I was disappointed. Not that I expected them to win. I thought that was going to be a very tough place to go in and get a victory. but I thought the performance itself really was lacking. The one thing that got me excited was when Waller was running with the ball, and what was it, a 29-yard catch and run?
29-yard. Yep.
Yeah, but then poof, it went away because we couldn't capitalize. That was a problem.
Well, because that was one of only 2 plays for 20 plus yards in the game, which is why I go back to Howard when I brought up the lack of explosive plays, or if you want to word it as chunk plays. But Howard, you hit on a key component that I want to piggyback off of, because what to me you were highlighting was the importance of this matchup driven league that we analyze every single week. And the fact that the Saints twisted and stunted a lot. And Dallas, if you recall, lives by that. And they also made the Giants offensive line pay. For some reason, now Green Bay wasn't a heavy blitz team, as we were talking about last week, and that's why Tommy was able to run. You figure it's a copycat league. I'm surprised more teams have not tested the Giants with the twists and the stunts, given how much they've had trouble with that this season.
It's amazing that if you watch the league and you watch teams, the Giants go in to play New Orleans, and this is no knock on, because Kafka's done such a great job, but they're a horrible, quote unquote, run defense. The first thing they do is they throw a deep pass. Now you're in 2nd and 10. You're going to have to do something. The next play is a minus play or a 0 play, and then you're in 3rd and long. Everybody was like, "Wow!" Like, at least they're trying to throw it deep to stretch them out. I'm like, now, if it wasn't for a penalty, the series is over. So they go down and they get 3 points. And everybody's like, "Okay, well," I said, "Okay, but pay attention to what happened." I'm like, they had a 0 yards play on the 1st down. They couldn't get the run started, and the 3rd down didn't work. So they wound up punting the ball, but the punter got run into. I said, that may be a theme. You have to be patient. Just watch. And they're like, you're being a Debbie Downer. I was like, no, watch what happens. The next play, the linebacker, great linebacker, runs through, hits the quarterback for a sack, like untouched. They couldn't even get a hand on him. So when you notice that teams are doing that, Dallas put out a blueprint of what they were going to be struggling with. The team has played better against teams that are quote unquote lesser teams, unfortunately, or matchups. But when you're playing against teams that are trying to get there, they're going to study tape. They're going to institute everything they need to beat you. I think Green Bay just kind of looked at the Giants so they don't win at night. So, we don't have to really worry about it. We'll be able to get to them, eventually. And then they saw okay, they're scoring points. What's going on here? And now you go back to the same thing that we talked about for most of the year. You're scoring 6 points in the game. You're not really being able to move the ball. And it all starts with the offensive line has to play better. The drops that occurred, the 2 drops that occurred, they came on Russ. They came on 1st down, 1st and 10 slant. Slayton hit him right in the chest. He's otherwise pretty good receiver, but at this particular time he drops. Next series, 1st and 10, or 2 series later, 1st and 10 to Hyatt, slant, hits him right in the chest. Both guys are clapping their hands and they're upset, but when you're struggling, every play matters, and you got to find a way to make it. Especially, it's almost like handoffs. You're hitting the guy with a slam, the 1st and 10 right in the chest. So, and it's a different world. They can't really hit you or blow you up on a slant anymore. They can't. They had a bad call when they tackled Bellinger on the sideline because the guy put his head across and hit him with his shoulder. But even that, just the optics of that makes them throw the flag. So you don't have to worry about guys trying to take you out when you catch the ball on a slant. And we just had a couple drops right there early on in the game that could have changed the flow of the game and maybe the momentum of the game.
It wasn't it though, Howard and Lance. Just really, if you just cut down to the basics, it was a perfect storm. It was Murphy's Law, and what I mean by the perfect storm, so the passing game wasn't going to be there. Once the running game was not going to be there, I mean, they were a sitting duck. They couldn't do anything. The defense of the Saints just had it any which way they wanted to have it. Then compounding everything. Listen, Howard, on defense, that was not a good performance by the Big Blue defense. I mean, all of a sudden we were seeing things, that we haven't seen the last few games.
Yeah, they had a couple problems. I thought they kept having lineup issues, and they kept looking back and forth and waving guys over. And a couple of times in the 3rd and long situations, they were trying to figure out of trips formation who was the 3rd guy. Alvin Kamara, blends or adds a problem because he's a guy that can be covered with a cornerback or a safety, And when a linebacker runs out to get him, now McFadden had a great play on him later in the game, but when they got the 3rd and longs, it's hard to figure out who to get out to where they're in front of the guys. Now, I thought they were just going to play sticks. That's where you drop back and protect the sticks and rush up to get to the guy. But the passes were, they weren't like, I don't mean to disparage Carp. They weren't like these bullets coming out to guys. They had chances to stop the guys. They let them run into zones and the big holes in the zone, and no one got close to them. And like, if no one's in front of you and a guy's like standing on the yard marker, you got to go get close to him to make sure that he can't, quote unquote, catch the ball for the first down.
And also on the flip side, they didn't have much of a pass rush too, because you look at the 1 sack by Jason Pinnock, and then they only had 2 quarterback hits. That's why Derek Carr was so efficient. He completed over 80% of his passes. He threw for 3 touchdowns. They capitalized in the red zone. There wasn't that disruption aspect. And I think it goes back to what the two of you are talking about. It's amazing because, Russ used the term perfect storm, but I think of all of the ideal things that have had to go right on both sides of the ball for the Giants to consistently win games this season. What I mean by that is on defense, they need takeaways, right? When they don't have takeaways, guys, it's a completely different defense because the takeaway shortens the field and does damage control. They didn't have takeaways in this game. 6 times that's happened this season. On offense, what do they need? They need to play clean football. You can't have penalties. You can't have sacks. They had 9 possessions in this game. On 8 of those 9 possessions, they had at least 1 negative play. And Howard, you brought up the first drive. They scored a field goal. What was the common element? They didn't dig themselves in a hole. And then the other drive that they got a field goal was the one you brought up when the Saints were called for that penalty, unnecessary roughness on Bellinger, which upon replay clearly was the wrong call because there wasn't a head-to-head hit. So think about it. It took those 2 scenarios, Howard, for the Giants to walk away with points in this game. I go back to the ideal situations that you need to score points and keep the opposition off the board. I mean, that's a lot of strain on a team.
Yeah, but turnovers are luck. They're not, you don't just make turnovers. Every team that had a good run of turnovers, they're luck. What the Saints did was, okay, Thibodeau and Dexter are the guys who are giving us most of the pressure. Let's double them. Let's double them every play. Thibodeau's going to get a chip no matter where he is on the field, and they chipped him. They chipped him a lot. So when he's trying to get his pass rush going, they're chipping him, knocking him back inside. And then you knock him back inside, you got 3 guys blocking Dexter sometimes 3 guys blocking Thibodeau. So if you try to eliminate those 2 guys, you have to have a 3rd and 4th guy that can come. The reason they got the sack was Pinnock just sprinted off the edge, and the back wasn't looking for him. The back was looking for Thibodeau or Ojulari off the edge, so he was going to try to chip him. And by the time he got back in position, Pinnock was already around him. The only way to get to them is they're going to be blitzing and trying to get there. I think McFadden had a couple blitzes where he ran up the field. He was in position, but he didn't hit him. He just didn't get close enough to affect the pass. I think Ojulari had a couple plays where he beat this guy off the edge, but clearly he's just a hand or a hair away from touching the quarterback. If you don't get your hands on him, it's 7-on-7 for the quarterback, and that's what it looks like when you don't hit guys.
Well, you know what, Howard, I understand. Sometimes turnovers are luck. Okay, sometimes it's a bad play by the offense, but regardless whether it's luck or good play by the defense, the bottom line is the Giants' offense needs help, and they didn't get it yesterday. When I say they need help, you get a turnover in the right place, it shortens your field, you get a chance to do something. So, I mean, it was Murphy's Law yesterday. To me, what could go wrong went wrong. Hey, guys, who played well yesterday? I mean, who stood out as a good performer for the Giants yesterday? I'll say it. As Dable said it, I'll say it again. Collectively, all around, it wasn't good enough, and it wasn't. Far from it.
Well, Russ, to your point, go ahead, Howard. Yeah.
I get you guys saying that when Coach Dable said this wasn't good enough, they were outclassed. I mean, everybody thinks that New Orleans like, oh, we're in the same kind of class, or they just weren't. Their defensive line looked excellent, even when they weren't, blitzing. They were stunting with the 4 guys. They were getting there. They were like running through the inside, pushing the back. That the middle linebacker was like a monster out there.
Mario Davis. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
where
he was all over the place.
sideline to
Yeah.
sideline, knocking guys down, never coming off the field. And he's not like a little guy. So, like, you know, just, I don't know how to explain it other than if you see what you're up against, I know it's all a good feeling, but you have to like bear down and understand, like, okay, this is going to happen. If they can't run the ball straight ahead and they have to continuously, quote unquote, run the ball to the edge with guys pulling, there are going to be constantly guys running through the line of scrimmage. It's on tape. Once it's on tape, everybody starts to emulate it.
Well, I think what Coach David was saying when he said collectively they weren't good enough. Quite frankly, collectively they weren't good enough to compete yesterday. It was not a competitive performance. It wasn't. Not you can't sugarcoat it. Listen, we've been praising them, and they deserve the praise the last 3 weeks. Not yesterday. Yesterday was a bad performance.
Well, Russ, going back to your question, when you say who played good, you're turning to name 3 or 4 Saints players before you even bring up a Giants player, right? I mean, Howard brought up Demario Davis, who's one of the best linebackers in football, on the first 2 possessions of the game. To just highlight Howard's point, he already had 3 tackles, 1 for loss, and a sack. And we were only 2 possessions into the game, guys. He was everywhere. All of the guys on the defensive front, Paul Granderson, Toa Passanao, whoever you want to name, and then Derek Carr, who was very efficient. I haven't even named 1 or 2 players on the Giants. And here's the other thing, guys, that's important to bring up. We talk about injuries in this league, okay? Everybody has to deal with them. And I know that's been a big theme with the Giants, not sugarcoating it, not using it as an excuse. But New Orleans was down Chris Olave, right? Their top wide receiver yesterday, and they were down one of their best offensive linemen, Ryan Ramczyk. When you were watching the game yesterday, did either of you at any point say, man, if New Orleans had Ramczyk and Olave, this would be a completely different game? We weren't bringing either of those guys up, which also speaks volume of the Saints' depth and players stepping up. Landon Young, 6th-round pick, 2021, filled in for Ramczyk. Olave, I don't think there was one guy. Derek Carr did a nice job spreading the wealth. But the point is, when you take 2 guys like that out of the equation, Russ, normally you're talking about their absence. We were not discussing that. So that's the difference between teams in the NFL. And that's where Howard brought up, a lot of people, the chatter was, the Saints are not a heavyweight. But you know what? At the end of the day, who cares what class they're in? If you don't execute as a team, Russ, it doesn't matter whether you're playing a team or a varsity team.
No, listen, I'll give the Saints credit for doing that. But at the same time, Lance and Howard, sometimes it's incumbent upon the opposing team, this one being the Giants, to step up as well. And they just, as we were saying, they weren't competitive yesterday. It was a very poor performance.
I know you guys keep saying competitive. They were just out schemed yesterday. They didn't do well offensive line with the stunts and the blitzes. They couldn't catch up. Once they got ahead of steam, that was a problem. The other thing that you guys don't realize when you're playing in New Orleans, it's unnervingly loud in New Orleans. Like, when I mean unnervingly loud, like it's ridiculous. So like you're watching and trying to get off the ball on time, and they were using that get off to their advantage. The offensive line couldn't keep up. It's just part of the game. Like they do it on purpose. They're pumping music in as loud as possible until the microphone in your helmet goes off, and then they shut it off. So whatever's being said to you before the 15 seconds of silence in your head, you can barely hear. You can't hear the play call in the huddle. Sometimes you don't get the snap count. It was, guys weren't getting beat that way, obviously, but it was affecting the entire game. DeVito looked poised trying to get it done, but it was happening. From the defensive standpoint, when your two best players are like, struggling because, quote unquote, they're getting doubled and tripled and bumped and nicked, it's hard. And everyone thought that, the running back was going to be, Alvin Kamara is only good in the pass. I'm like, he's good at whatever he does. And so he was taking 2 yards, 3 yards, 7 yards, 2 yards, 3 yards, 8 yards over and over again. And if you didn't get to him right away, he'd gas you. He wouldn't gas you for like 25 or 30 yards, but 7 yards here puts you in a 2nd and 3. And that's what you need to keep drives going. And they were able to do that. And they were very effective at it.
Yeah, I've always looked at Kamara. I'm glad you brought it up. I've always looked at him. To me, he's one of the most, for me, for Russ here, he's one of the most dangerous players in the league because he can catch it, he can run with it, he can be explosive. He's just a very good football player.
Mhm.
He's slippery.
Even at this
Yeah.
age,
Yeah.
even at this age, he's still great.
Because he's so good in terms of contributing in both facets of the game. As Howard was alluding to, you have to account for him on the ground. You also have to account for him as somebody out of the backfield who Derek Carr will dump off. And then he'll turn a 2-yard pass into a 7-yard gain because he'll get 5 or 6 yards. If you look a lot of his runs yesterday, it was a tight crevice and it looked like maybe the Giants are going to be in the vicinity. And then he navigated. That's why I use slippery. And all of a sudden, it's now a manageable 2nd or 3rd down. And that's the big difference between, if you look at this game, I know, Howard, you want to talk about the fact that they were maybe out-schemed. I mean, to me, that's also a product of the lack of execution. Those two terms go hand in hand. You could have a great game plan, but at the end of the day, you don't bring guys down, you don't tackle, okay? You don't pass protect. That's not executing at the end of the day. And that's the biggest difference between these two.
Unfortunately, that's not how it works. You can be out schemed. There was a lot of out scheming done. The twists, the noise, that's a scheme. You understand? You're not going to forget about executing. If they already know that you have problems with something, then you go to it immediately. It's the old adage, like if it works, don't stop doing it until it doesn't work. And that's what they did. They went back to something they saw in game 1, and they started to try it over and over. And it's like, with this noise, they'll never be able to keep up, and they couldn't. And as far as the backs go, when you watch guys like Kamara, I think Christian McCaffrey is another guy that I think about when I see this. Guys that get to the hole and explode, like they don't stutter, they explode and try to get through the hole. Those are guys that aren't necessarily slippery. That burst they hit when they get to the hole may get them 1 yard. Sometimes they miss with an arm tackle and it gets them 10 yards. That's a tack that only a few backs in the league use. I think Josh Jacobs uses it also. When he gets to the hole, he's at full speed the moment he decides. When he makes his determination, I'm going to get 2 yards, I'm going to get 1 yard, I'm going to get 100 yards because I'm gone. And that's, those style running backs are the hardest running backs to stop, because if you don't hit them right away, or if they get their step, or get their foot in the ground and get started, they're already upfield. That's not slippery. That's just the way they're running. They're running at full pace the moment they make their commitment to going forward.
Yeah, no, you know what, Howard? That's one of my pet peeves in football. When I see it back, if you hit the hole, even if you're getting 2, +2, 2nd and 8 is a lot better than 2nd and 12. When stuff like that happens, and you see the explosiveness. And you just mentioned guys like McCaffrey and Kamara. That's a very good example.
Yeah, and I'm not a running back. I couldn't tell you how running backs see things or what's in their head, but like certain guys, the way they run with, okay, I see, I'm just going to run off the hip of this guy, and they take off. Once they start, they're not looking left or right. They're going at full pace, and then once they get through the line of scrimmage and the dust kind of clears, it's when they make their first move to the outside or the inside, and they try to take it to the house.
But Howard, isn't that a product of also the continuity, or you want to call connection between the running backs and the offensive line? Because if the offensive line is not getting the job done and the running back doesn't have the confidence that the hole is going to be there, then the running back is worried about jittering and trying to jitterbug and do a little razzle dazzle, and before you know it, it's a 3-yard loss.
If they're hitting you in the backfield before you can put your foot in the ground, there's no need. But like when these guys are getting, like guys that have opportunities to get to the line of scrimmage and give that burst, those are guys that are extraordinarily dangerous, and he's one of those guys.
And that also magnifies one of the biggest differences between the Giants and the Saints yesterday, because the Giants, Saquon Barkley, 9 carries, 14 yards, which was a season low for him. And the team only ran for 60 yards. And you go back to the Packers game the previous week, Tommy DeVito wasn't sacked. They stayed in manageable 3rd downs, but they also had a run game. And even if DeVito was responsible for the bulk of the run game, you still had that feature, that aspect, which was non-existent at all. And I know, Howard, you've gone back and forth with me throughout the season. I'm going to bring it back again, because this is the point that Russ was highlighting earlier. If the defense gives you takeaways, whether you think they're luck, whether you think they're scheme, you're telling the offense, hold on, I know you're antsy. I'll get to you here. You're telling the offense, We don't have to put you in a position to go 75, 80 yards down the field. Whereas yesterday, that offense had to go 75, 80 yards down the field. And I've been emphasizing this all season, either because of personnel issues with injuries or penalties or sacks. This offense is not built to have put together 4 to 5 80-yard touchdown drives every single game. We have yet to see it this season. And they were put in that position once again yesterday.
You romanticize turnovers. You've watched 3 games where the Giants have gotten a lot of turnovers, and you've watched as many as they've gotten, they've missed. You've watched guys
drop. A lot of drops. Yeah.
You watch balls bounce off guys' hands onto
Absolutely.
the ground. You watch all these things. So when I say turnovers are luck, they're luck. And sometimes the ball bounces in your hands, and sometimes it doesn't. And when a quarterback is standing back there by himself, and there's nobody within arm's length of him throwing the ball, there are no turnovers to be had. So you're going to have to figure out a way just to get stops. The defense had a chance to get stops, to get 3s and outs, and get them to punt the ball and get them another chance. Even though the offense can't go 75 yards every play, they had an opportunity to get the ball back to the offense over and over again, and they gave up 3rd and longs, 3rd and whatevers, and it wasn't penalties. They just weren't in the right place at the right time, and they were schemed to be there, but they just didn't. They didn't perform at the level they usually perform at either. Now the blocks, the double teams, that's what you're going to see for the rest of the year on Thibodeau and Dex. You're going to see people doubling down on Dex, doubling down on Thibodeau, and there's going to be other guys who are going to come up big and make plays, not just in the run game, but to get to the passer. And it can't be a blitz every time, because if you blitz against the Eagles, they got a couple of receivers out there that are going to take you to the cleaners. They just are. If you blitz and you don't get there, Green and Smith are going to light you up. They just are. So you got to figure out a way to get your guys. Other guys have to get there from the front and make it a problem for, quote unquote, the last few teams that you're going to play. You're going to play one team twice, the other team one time. You got to find a way to get there from a defensive standpoint. If you're not around him, if you're not touching him, if you're not close to him, it's 7-on-7 for the quarterback, and guys will get open. You can't cover 3-4 seconds, because after the 4th second, it is what it is.
Well, Giants are up against a big time coming up the next game against the Eagles, in Philly. You're talking about a team that is not just fighting, for a number 1 seed. You talk about teams who are in the playoff hunt. They're not just fighting for a number 1 seed overall. They're still fighting, depending upon what they do tonight against Seattle. They're fighting for the number 1 spot in the division. So I mean, Giants, for lack of a better term, are up against it really big time. So there's got to be a major improvement in every facet of the game coming off of what we got to see yesterday.
And what have I said? Like what I say a few weeks ago, I don't care if they win or not. I just want them to improve a little bit every game, and they can have some big improvements, some big strides in this game. And people, they didn't win. If they look better, if the offensive line blocks better, if you get a little bit more of a running game, if the receivers don't drop passes, if you get a little more pressure on it, you don't have to sack him. Quarterback hits. Jalen is hobbled right now. He may not even play against us, depending on what happens tonight in this game. So those kind of things are opportunities for the team to get better and get chances to make major strides. Are they going to beat the Eagles? Who knows? Any week, anything can happen. But you can get better against the Eagles. You can be more competitive against the Eagles. Now that you've kind of let the hangover of, hey, it's a party, the DeVito party, everything's great. Hangover's over. Now figure it out and try to get better this coming week. And that's all you can do when you're a team like this part of the year. Get better. Find ways to get better. Make sure that you're doing something positive that helps out. More film, more tape, more energy in practice. Get better. Another hour or so of working out. Get better. And that's what they're going to have to do, as a group collectively. Can't be lip service. You got to get better.
Well, get better.
Especially since go ahead, Russ.
I'm sorry. Get better is something that I think that's why people were disappointed. I know I was. Get better was something that didn't happen yesterday. In those last 3 games, we were seeing getting better, a little better this, a little better than that. And yesterday, it went the other way.
I
Well,
think
and
you
I
had,
think, yeah.
I'm sorry, Lance. I think you have a hangover because I kept saying to you, like, that, be patient with what you're watching because this is not, it's kind of a false narrative. I mean, Tommy DeVito's great, a lot of fun, almost a Lynn Zanity kind of moment for the sport. But they were, the first few games, he was getting sacked a tremendous lot. I mean, he was getting hit. And then he kind of got, okay, well, you got a couple of teams that weren't playing as well, and we scored some points. Especially scoring points at home makes everybody happy. But the reality of it was that Green Bay they didn't try to blitz him, they didn't do anything. He had a 7-on-7 session. So now when teams go back to, we got to stop them, get them off the field, give them long fields. They can't compete in a long field scenario, like Lance is saying. And then you see like the pressure and the stress, not just the QB is not stressed, but the entire team. Everyone's desperate to make a play. And that luck of turnovers, if all of a sudden, if you're not hitting their quarterback, turnovers are almost impossible to get.
Well, I'm with you there. I was going to go in a different direction, but you keep coming back to my favorite topic. So I can't cough this up here. No, I'm with you there, Howard. You got to be able to hit the quarterback. But I think there's other examples of where the Giants have been good in taking away the ball that maybe you're dismissing a little. For example, when Bobby Okereke in the open field punches the ball out, that's a part of a fundamental skill that Wink and the coaching staff is emphasizing that creates a takeaway that has nothing to do with hitting the quarterback. When Xavier McKinney gets his hand in through the defender and knocks the ball away, those are fundamental skills creating takeaways. And I think that needs to be highlighted as well.
I think what you're talking about, if you think about what you're saying is that when someone has their hand around a guy's waist and the next guy comes in and punches at the ball, that is a luck shot. You can punch at it 10 times. You can punch at it 30 times. One time, it will come out.
I like how you ran all these experiments and these results. I'm impressed that you and your scientific lab.
Lance, you're laughing and being funny. Think about it. You watch games every week. There are group tackles every week. Every week, you see a guy draw his hand back and punch at the ball.
But Howard, let me ask you this. Aren't there certain guys? I think we spent too much time this entire season talking about the luck of turnovers as opposed to not being lucky. But there are certain guys in this league who are very, very good at creating that turnover, at punching the ball out. Is that not a fair thing to say?
It's not a fair thing to say because if a guy was so good at it, he'd have like 25 turnovers or 25 caused fumbles, 25 interceptions, 30 interceptions. The luck of what they're doing, it's great. You're taught to cover the ball high and tight. When a guy comes in and punches at the ball, he hits his forearm. He'll hit your bicep, your forearm. He has to come inside. Guys rake at the top of your hand trying to pull your hand down. And when I tell you guys, I like it, it's fun, the peanut punch. That's what they used
Charles
to call
Peanut Tillman. I was just going to bring him up.
The peanut punch.
Correct.
How many turnovers did he cause in the season?
I even don't know his numbers off the top of my head, but Howard, he was up there. He did that consistently.
Yeah, he had like 6 or 7 in the season, like causing
That's still pretty good. That's not impressive enough.
Seven out of 800 plays he probably played that season, and you're like, that's incredible. It's luck, and it's good. It's good to keep trying it because if you're lucky, it'll work. That's the point I'm making, and I'm not trying to be facetious about anything. That's the point I'm making is that you're doing something in hopes of getting something to happen. If I throw the ball to you and you catch it, that's not luck. That's execution. If I peanut punch and the ball doesn't come out, I executed it perfectly. The ball didn't come out. If I do it like 50 times in a row, the ball doesn't come out, the ball doesn't come out. If I do it one more time, the ball comes out, oh my God, I did. I'm like, no, that you can't go into a game expecting to do that. When you run by a quarterback and he got his hand back and you swipe the ball out, that's great technique. That's great everything. If you hit the quarterback, well, you can't really hit him anymore. It causes a fumble, but great technique. That just stepping and putting yourself in a position to cut that slant off and catching the ball when he throws it because the quarterback doesn't see you. That's great technique. Those aren't luck. Those are things that you're doing and you've schemed to do. The punch, that's unfortunately, I don't know how to explain it other than that.
Well, I just looked it up. Charles Tillman. Wait, Russ, real quick. Charles Tillman has set the NFL record for the most forced fumbles in a season. He had 10 in 2012. And then he has the record for the most in a single game with 4. Do those numbers, do they meet the ability to beyond luck on the defensive playing side? Or are we still in the, well, you know, he was in the right vicinity and he got a fingernail on the football?
I'm just telling you, Lance, if you notice how many plays the guy plays, it's really luck. He punched at every guy he tried to tackle.
But the fundamentals, I'm saying, is putting him in a position to attempt to do that, Howard.
Yeah,
you're right. You're not going to force a fumble on every play, but you're going to position yourself.
There you go. You're going to keep trying. You just keep trying it over and over. And when it happens, it's great. But to say that they're going to do it, if it was like a true skill, it would be done all the time, and it would be fumbles everywhere.
You see, Lance, I think Howard is trying to explain to you and me that it's like turnovers are like buying lottery tickets. You keep buying them and buying them and buying them.
They happen.
Maybe you're lucky enough to hit the big one, but it's luck.
Yes, you keep scratching with the coin and you hope that it finally comes up to your liking.
I mean, like you think about Saquon ran down the field the game before, sprinting, falls down, and the ball comes out. Like, that's a lucky play because he just fell.
Of course. I mean, you use the extreme example of all the things we discussed. You give the example when the guy stumbles and coughs up the football.
That's the exact thing that you're talking about when they punch the ball out. That's no lucky. That his arms got to be in the right place at the right time. Everything's got to be exact for the moment. Yeah.
Which is why I go back to fundamentals and practicing and being in position. All of that contributes. There's no doubt about it. And I want our listeners and viewers to understand we're working on an off-season podcast. It'll be Giants turnovers. We're going to go back and analyze every single turnover and takeaway this season. And Howard, with video as a complimentary piece, will break down and he will determine luck or unlucky. And we'll have a very positive game that we'll be playing all off-season. We're working on a sponsor, by the way, Howard. I'm telling you, the Giants production team, This is a really hot commodity and an idea.
I can go through every last one of them if it's a call.
I'm looking forward to it. I want you to do it. I need closure.
I can show you why you are totally out of your mind. There we go. He punches it out right here. Look at this. Like, here's like the 4 previous plays, same spot. He's going for the punch. It didn't happen. What's different? And then you'll be like, well, his arm. Well, no, it's luck. And the guys that do it will tell you.
And that's why I'm telling you, we need a new podcast. And we could bring on Charles Peanut Tillman and we could convince him that he just wasn't that opportunistic as perhaps the stats and the video showcases. But in all seriousness, as we wrap up shop here, and I want to piggyback off of what Russ brought up, Philly has not been a good matchup for the Giants, both in recent and past history. And I think that's what Russ was getting at. So when you bring up improvement, I'm with you. But, Russ brought up it's disappointing when you don't see the improvement consistently. And I think, Russ, that goes back to it's because it's such a different matchup. What Howard was talking about, when the Cowboys stunt and twist, and then you don't see that for a few weeks, the only time you're going to see improvement is when you then see a team like New Orleans showcase it again, and they're going to test you. Philadelphia has dominated the Giants in the trenches. And whether or not they're fully healthy or not, and a lot is going to depend on what happens Monday night against the Seahawks as we're recording this. But if you want to see improvement, I'm interested to see how battle-tested the Giants are with the Eagles, how competitive they can make the game. Because, Russ, in years past, that has not been the case.
Competitive is the word. That's, again, that's what we want to see, the improvement. And coming off of yesterday, there's a lot of room for improvement coming up against a Christmas Day special against the Eagles.
Well, so what would be competitive, you guys? They lost by 10 or they lost by 6? Or what's competitive?
And sometimes, and you know this, Howard, things can the scoreboard can get a little nuts. So I'm just talking about a good overall effort, a good competitive effort. Talk about receiving, upfront blocking, running backs from defense. Everything that I just mentioned was lacking yesterday. I want to see an improvement all the way around. That's all.
Yeah, I'm with Russ. I don't think you go by the score because, sometimes you get a late touchdown that doesn't reflect how competitive the game is. Howard, I'm looking at, do the Eagles force 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out? Do they get 7 or 8 sacks like the Saints do? And you get to the point where there is no continuity. There's no consistency on offense. And we've seen performances like that against Philly. We've seen it against Dallas. So that, to me, I think would be a strong indication.
You know, we've also seen games where like, hey, the score could be like 27-20, but when you look back at it, it was a 27-20, but the team with the 20 really had no chance of winning the game. You know, maybe there was a late touchdown, it was a late this or that. I just want to see a good overall competitive effort and improvement in every facet. And there's plenty of room for improvement coming off of yesterday.
Okay.
So with that being said, I think it's fair to say, gentlemen, we had a lot of strong takeaways on this program in terms of breaking down the Giants and the Saints. So much to consume, so much to analyze, as this is the Giants Hangout podcast presented by Crestron, a proud partner of the New York Giants. Lance Meadow, Russ Salzberg, Howard Cross with you. We'll be back next Tuesday since the Giants play on Christmas on Monday. So we'll be recapping the festivities on Tuesday. Check that out and look for the latest edition of the Giants Hangout, which you can check out on Giants.com, the mobile app, and your favorite podcast platforms. Have a good one.